Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner is continuing to dominate the headlines as her fate is set to be sealed today.
So the official report into her underpaying stamp duty is expected within hours, and Sir Keir Starmer is refusing to rule out sacking her if she did break stamp duty rules. We're joined now by Minister for Trade Policy and Economic Growth, Douglas Alexander. Good to speak to you this morning. I know you've got things you want to talk about as well from your department, but no doubt the papers for another day are dominated by Angela Rayner's plight and the implications for the Labour government in general. If it's found, whenever it comes out, that she has broken the ministerial code, broken the rules, are you clear in your mind that she should be sacked or not?
So firstly, listen, these are not headlines any of us would have chosen, as your introduction suggested, and there's a process that is now underway. We came into office saying we would strengthen the independent office of advising ministers, and at the same time we would allow ministers to refer themselves, if they found themselves in these circumstances, directly to that independent office for ministerial standards. That process is now underway. The work is being done. Frankly, I don't know any more than your viewers in terms of who said what to who and when. All the facts are being gathered by Sir Laurie Magnus, the independent advisor. He will then put that report on the desk of the Prime Minister, and then the Prime Minister will reach his judgment. And that's how it works with the Ministerial Code. And I think it's right and reasonable just to wait potentially a few more hours or a few more days, depending on how long Sir Laurie needs to be able to undertake that vital work.
Very helpful explanation of the process, which can get lost, can't it, in all the headlines. The problem is there's an emotional reaction that the country feels despite that detail you've outlined. And one of the things that's coming through pretty much unanimously from our viewers is that this feels wrong somehow, either because she didn't conduct due diligence, she didn't do the proper checks that you would expect someone in her senior position to have done, or, you know, maybe worse. So on that basis, what choice is there, if it's found that she has broken it, for her not to go?
So firstly, in terms of the public reaction, listen, I understand, and as I said, none of us would want to be witnessing these headlines when there are other issues that we would far rather be talking about as a government. But I'd make a couple of points. Firstly, in any workplace, in any part of the country, it's right and reasonable that there is a process when a complaint or a concern is raised and that people are given the chance to offer the evidence and then a judgment would be reached. And secondly, Angela Rayner is the Deputy Prime Minister. She's not a lawyer, she's not a tax accountant. The reason that any of us go to lawyers or tax accountants is to take advice. Now, honestly, I don't know the character of that advice. I don't know who was spoken to.
Well, the problem is today, the advice she stated, that firm has come out and said we never gave her advice. And, of course, advice is an official term. She might have felt like it was advice when they talked to her. But, you know, that implies not just being not a lawyer, but not being careful enough.
But honestly, Kate, your question confirms in my mind why we need Sir Laurie Magnus to look at all of the facts. Because I genuinely don't know, but the one person who will know is the one person who matters, who's the independent advisor on ministerial standards. And hopefully, in a short time, it's ultimately up to Sir Laurie how long he takes, but he will put all of that evidence on the desk of the Prime Minister, and on that basis, he'll reach his decision. And I understand you want me, and many people want me, to prejudge that. Respectfully, I'm the Trade Minister, not the Prime Minister. It's ultimately the Prime Minister who make the judgment, but we're not going to have to wait that long, I think.
But there is a bigger issue, isn't there, which is this is a government that's looking at tax rises. It's looking at a government that was looking at stamp duty changes. So it's not really just about her personally. There is a vacuum at the moment in what we're expected to do as a nation and what the government appears to be behaving like.
So a couple of points. Firstly, it'll ultimately be for the Chancellor at the budget at the end of November to set out her approach to tax and to spending and all of these issues. That's the Chancellor's responsibility. But secondly, if you say, well, does it mean the government's talking about all of these issues rather than focusing on those policy questions? You're right, and that's why we want this process undertaken really quickly. Now, ultimately, it needs to be done diligently, it needs to be done carefully. Everyone's got a right to expect that. But on the other hand, let's hope that this can be dealt with fairly quickly so that we can get back not just to talking about other issues, but actually delivering and focusing on those other issues as well.
Just on that, Douglas Alexander, but Rushanara Ali, she resigned. There was no big investigations, no real questions asked. She just put her hands up, said, this doesn't look great. Although she didn't really break the law, apparently, just as a dubious landlord activity. Should she not have resigned, then, do you think? Do you think she should still be in place?
As a minister,
why aren't we seeing the same thing from Angela Rayner? She's housing minister and dealing with stamp duty issues.
So as a minister or as an employee of any business in any part of the country, you should and do have the right to resign. So in that sense, Rushanara's judgment was that she no longer wanted to continue to serve in the government and felt that wasn't the right course of action. Angela has referred herself, first of all, to get the independent advice of a King's Counsel. Then, as soon as that report came back to her, I think it was on Wednesday, she immediately referred herself to Sir Laurie Magnus. Sir Laurie Magnus is now undertaking that work. I think it's reasonable that there's a process, and frankly, I think you'd be criticising us if it was simply a judgment for the individual. There needs to be a reasonable process.
All right, let's move on to something else. This is the news overnight. Hadush Kabatu from Ethiopia has been found guilty of sexually assaulting a 14-year-old girl and a woman, and our thoughts, of course, with the girl and the woman in the Epping area. Now, he will be sentenced in a few weeks' time, but ultimately he's an asylum seeker and he can be deported if it's a sentence that's over 12 months, which is probably likely to be. But should he be deported if the facts are, and his lawyers might claim, that his life would be under threat if we sent him back to Ethiopia for whatever reason he might be persecuted? In your view, what do you think we should be doing?
So firstly, this is a horrifying case, and the most important thing is justice for the victim. And in that sense, you're right, even in your question and anticipating that I understand the sentencing has not yet taken place. I don't really want to be in a position where, ahead of that sentencing, government ministers are in any way intervening in what's still a live case.
We've got a conviction now, and everyone at home are looking at you, looking at the government for some real guidance. We know it's a big issue for a lot of people at home. Asylum seekers create some very serious crimes. Should he be deported, or should he not be deported because he might be deported to an unsafe country? That's a very simple question that you can answer.
Well, there are ways that people can be deported, even if it is not to individual countries. And in that sense, if you say, do we want criminals who conduct criminality here in the United Kingdom, having come here by whatever route, to be capable of being deported? 100%. Absolutely. But you'll appreciate I'm just cautious on this individual case because I don't want in any way to prejudice the judge's decision in terms of sentencing. But if you say as a broad principle, do we want to be able to deport people who have acted in a criminal way in the United Kingdom? Absolutely.
OK. So you want to talk about the defence industry being an engine for growth, and you do talk about that. The problem is, of course, is that growth slowed in the last quarter compared with the months before. And actually, ordinary people are not feeling that growth. They're worried about what new taxes they might have to pay and what the budget is going to land on their lap.
Yeah, I get that. And I understand that people are frustrated because they want change more quickly. Let's not have an argument about the statistics, but if you look at the first couple of quarters of the year, we grew the fastest of any economy in the G7. But would we like to see that growth growing in the future? Of course we would. That's what we're working each and every day to deliver. And what we're announcing today is confirmation that in the last 12 months, £1.2 billion of foreign direct investment has come into the UK in our defence sector. That hasn't just happened by chance, but by choice. I began the week with John Healey, the Defence Sector Secretary on board HMS Prince of Wales, the flagship of the Royal Navy in Tokyo Bay. We were there beating the drum and making the case for the British defence industries, sending a clear signal to Japanese investors that Britain is open for business, and that is yielding results. Just earlier this week, in my part of the world, in Scotland, we saw a £10 billion contract from the Norwegian government to build frigates that will guarantee work for the next 15 years on the Clyde.
OK, Douglas Alexander, we'll have to leave it there, but thank you so much for joining us this morning.